Hey guys, it's John from Physical Living, and in this video I'm going to be comparing club bells with kettlebells. Somebody was asking me the other day which one of these I'd recommend they pick up for their home gym, and I thought, hey, that would be a good topic for a video for you guys to help you figure out which one you might be more interested in using, or which one is more suitable for you and for your goals. So I figured, hey, I'll just turn on the camera and blab at you for a little bit. There is a lot that I want to cover. I've been using them for a long time and I've learned a lot about them. And so this will be a longer video, but I'm going to do the best I can to stay on topic and not ramble. And if I do, I'll be sure to cut out some of that unnecessary footage. But I do want to make sure I do the best I can to help you make as informed a decision as possible. So the short version of the video is that I really like both of these tools. I've been using them both for a long time. Club bells about 10 years and kettlebells a little bit longer. And I really enjoy using them both. They're both great tools. And so if you can afford to get some of each of them, maybe over the next few or several months, or next year or two even, I think that's the best option. You know, they're both really fun tools. They're quite versatile. You can use them for a lot of different goals and a ton of different exercises. And they each come with some unique benefits and advantages over the other tool. And because of that, they kind of complement each other really well when it comes to strength training and strength endurance training. And so that's the best case scenario, get some of each. But if you can't afford to get some of each, or maybe you just want to really focus on one or the other, learn it and master it over the next several months or years, then that's great too. And hopefully this video will help you figure out which one you'd be most interested in using. And so that's kind of the short version of the video. They're both great tools, and it really comes down to what you're interested in, what you think you'd enjoy using more, be more inclined to use over the long term, to stick with consistently. That's really what it comes down to. In the grand scheme of things, there's not that big of a difference between these tools, and when you get past all of the drama and the dogma and the marketing and the people on the internet saying my tool is better than your tool for ABC reasons and blah blah blah, when you look at these in the grand scheme of health, fitness, and strength training, there's a lot more similarities than differences. When you think about it, they're both portable, compact, free weights that can be lifted and swung, and are primarily meant for strength training and strength endurance training. And so they can be used for a lot of different goals: fat loss, muscle building, performance enhancement, the list goes on. Basically any goal that you can achieve with strength training as part of it, these can be helpful. And they are unique tools. They're both unique tools. They're both fun to use and can be used for a lot of different exercises and movements that aren't as easy to perform with a barbell or a dumbbell or other conventional training tools. In many cases, you just can't perform or strengthen these movements with more conventional training tools. So that's a short version of the video, and you might be able to just stop it right here and say, I'm a little bit more interested in swinging clubs. I'm going to try that. That sounds interesting to me. Or, I think kettlebells would be, make a little bit more sense to me, and I'm just going to go with that. So there I go rambling. I'll try and limit that. So you should probably know at the outset that I am a little bit more biased towards club bells over kettlebells. Again, I love both of these tools. I use both of these tools frequently. I have over 10 years now. And but I am more biased, and I think it's mostly just because I enjoy using them more. It's just a more fun tool for me. It's kind of unique and different, and you can do things with a club bell that you cannot do with a kettlebell, or at least you cannot do as well or as safely or efficiently. And so there's kind of a greater variety of unique exercises, given that it's a club and primarily a swinging tool. Which is very different from most lifting tools like barbells and dumbbells and to an extent kettlebells too. So I am a little bit more biased, but having said that, I'm going to do the best I can to remain as unbiased as I can in presenting my perspective on these tools, because I'm not trying to sell you either one here. I love them both, and if you'd be better served with kettlebells, then that's what I want you to get. I want you to be happy, and so that's the goal of this whole video, really. So let's get started actually comparing them. So this is a club bell, this is a kettlebell. Just want to make sure I point that out for you newbies. Not that I'm making fun, but this is a 35-pound kettlebell from Perform Better. It's pro grade competition style kettlebell, meaning it can be used in kettlebell sport for those who are interested. As you can see, most of the weight is in the bell portion, and you have this handle sticking out to the side. And so the center of mass is over here, and the grip is offset from that center of mass, which is, you know, really different from a dumbbell where you grip between the center of mass. It's a very balanced tool, and this is an imbalanced tool. And what that creates when you have the grip offset is it creates a leverage disadvantage, a leverage challenge. And if you could imagine this grip, you know, being a little bit longer, you know, coming out to here maybe or here maybe, the longer the grip is, the further away that you grip the tool from its center of mass, the greater the leverage challenge is. And I'm pretty sure everybody watching this video could figure that out for themselves, but I did want to illustrate it. So that's a 35-pound kettlebell, and this is a 15-pound CST club bell. And the same concept applies. Most of the weight is up here in the barrel, and you grip it all the way down here, and you'll notice it's a much greater distance between the center of mass and where you grip the club bell, and that creates an even greater leverage disadvantage, a greater leverage challenge. And so that's why relatively lighter club bell, 15-pound club bell, can feel substantially heavier, is in part because of that leverage disadvantage. And one of the cool perks of the club bell is that you can micro-adjust the amount of leverage by choking up on the grip. And so if you grip it up here, almost all exercises are going to be easier simply because there's less leverage involved. And then as you get better, more proficient with the exercise, you can gradually slide your grip down the club bell handle. So that's one of that leverage feature is one of the cool things about these tools, because you know, not only does it increase the challenge of a exercise with a relatively lighter weight than you would need with a heavier dumbbell to approximate it, but it also makes these tools much easier to swing. And these are both primarily swinging tools, but the kettlebell is kind of more of a balance tool in that it's kind of, I'd say it's even maybe a 50-50 blend. I hate to like put a specific ratio. I don't know what the ratio is, but there's a ton of lifting exercises that you can use kettlebells for. You know, your conventional presses and rows and squats and deadlifts, you know, all lifting exercises. And then there's all kinds of swinging exercises too, like kettlebell swings and side swings and swing blades, and there's just all sorts of great swinging exercises, and that's made easier simply because of that offset weight. This would be a lot harder to swing if it was a dumbbell. Simply because it doesn't have that leverage issue. So I chose these two weights for a reason, and that's because a 15-pound club bell and a 35-pound kettlebell are the general weights that your average adult male would start training with. And ideally, it would be a pair of 15-pound club bells for double club bell work. But part of the reason why there's such a disparity in the weight, the kettlebell is over twice as heavy as a club bell, is because of that leverage disadvantage. You're gripping this so much further away from the center of mass, and so it feels a lot heavier than 15 pounds. And having had a lot of people come up to me when I'm using club bells and say, hey, you know, what are those? That's kind of interesting. What do you use it for? How much does it weigh? And they go to pick it up, whether it's a 15 or a 25, and they can't believe it. Oh my gosh, there's no way that's 15 pounds. That feels way heavier than 15 pounds. And you know, some of these big, strong guys, you know, really get, you know, like instantly humbled by, and they think I'm some, you know, super strong beast because I make it look so easy. And it's not that I'm stronger than them or that they're weak or anything. It's just they haven't been trained in how to do it. And, you know, they had you know, thought that maybe it'd be easier to pick it up like that, you know, which is practically effortless, than opposed to, you know, levering it up, which would be really hard, right? So that's one of the advantages of both of these tools, and I think particularly with club bells, you can use fairly light weights. I mean, 15 pounds is not much. You think about what could I do with a 15-pound dumbbell? I could, you know, bench press it 1,000 times probably, I don't know, never tried anything like that. But 15-pound club bell can be used to elicit substantial training adaptations because in part of that leverage challenge, but also because when you swing these, it creates momentum, right? And that momentum creates torque, which is another force, separate from gravity. Not only is gravity pulling this down, but the swinging motion, the momentum, is pulling it away from me. And so I have to control that torque that is generated by holding on to it and contracting my muscles and staying in good alignment and moving well and breathing properly and just, using good technique basically. And so the faster it swings, the greater the torque that is created. And so that's force that I have to control. And so you can use, a 15-pound club bell can generate substantially more foot-pounds of force that need to be controlled simply because of that momentum. And it increases exponentially. And so if you swing, if you perform a slow swing, for example, and then let's say you could manage to double your speed, double your cadence, you're going to quadruple the amount of torque that's generated and really amplify how much your body has to stabilize and control that tool. And so that's kind of the sciencey geek stuff behind it. But those are the two of the really main selling points of these tools is that they can be lighter, they can be swung, they come with that leverage disadvantage, and that's what really makes them stand apart from dumbbells and barbells and other more traditional equipment. Another cool thing about them, and this is especially true with the club bell, at least to a greater extent, is that in almost all swinging exercises, there's a traction component involved. And what I mean by that is when the club bell is pulling away from you, I'm having to hold it, to keep it from flying off and, knocking out Johnny or killing Fluffy. And as this is pulling away from me, I have to pull it back toward me. And so there's this traction, and what that does is it helps to pull and separate the joint capsules, like in your elbow, probably the easiest example. My elbow is being pulled apart, right? Because the club bell is pulling it out, pulling my lower arm out, and my shoulder, my core, my upper arm is trying to pull back, right, to counterbalance that force. And so my elbow, in a sense, is being stretched. And that allows lubrication to rush in there into some of the crevices that don't necessarily get it. Get that blood flow, get that synovial fluid where it needs to go during everyday activities. And so there is kind of a restorative aspect to that traction as opposed to compression. Like when you're doing, for instance, a push-up with your elbows, they're compressed because there's weight being held down on them, and so your elbow joint is kind of pushed together, and all that lubrication, that synovial fluid, gets squeezed out. Here's the visual. That's like your joint right here, your elbow joint, for lack of a better example. So generally speaking, the club bell and all weighted clubs are more suited for swinging exercises than lifting exercises, and the kettlebell is more of a balance between them. And one of the reasons for that is that pretty much any exercise that you can do with a dumbbell, you can also, or a pair of dumbbells, you can also do with kettlebells. So everything from presses and rows. So you can lay down on a bench and do bench presses, or you can do overhead presses. You can do double overhead presses. You can do, all kinds of different rowing exercises and squats and deadlifts and wrist curls if you want to, right? And so that makes the kettlebell more of a balanced training tool. And so I think this is something that's probably more appealing to people who come from more of a traditional strength and conditioning background. Maybe you work out at a gym, use a lot of free weights, barbells, and dumbbells. For those people, the kettlebell is going to make a lot more sense to you, and it's of the two tools, it's the easier one to learn anyways, in my experience. But because you can use it for all those traditional exercises, it's just going to be easier to pick up for a lot of you more traditional folks. And in my experience, the club bell, while it is my favorite tool, it is a more difficult tool to learn. And I think it's because the motion of swinging and controlling the force with your whole body instead of isolating certain muscle parts, it's, both of these are very whole body systemic integrated tools, where your whole body has to be engaged in order to properly and efficiently control the implement. Whether you're doing a kettlebell swing or club bell swipes, most people know what a kettlebell swing looks like. There's a club bell swipe. This is obviously a full body exercise, as is the club bell mill. Make sure I've got enough room here. This isn't like arms and shoulders. I'm using my legs to power this, my hips, my glutes. My core is channeling the energy up into my shoulder. I'm kind of whiplashing or whipping the club bell with my arm. So that's a full body, really systemic exercise. And in most of these cases, we're strengthening not just muscles, but movement patterns. And so for that reason, and other reasons, the club bell seems to be a harder tool. It has a longer learning curve and a steeper learning curve. And in my experience, having used these for 10 years and being professionally certified to teach them and working with a lot of people using them, most people do not use anything close to safe and efficient technique with the club bell until they've gotten instruction or have really dedicated themselves to learning it on their own, getting quality educational resources, videotaping themselves, over a long period of time. And so you should be aware of that. If you want something that's a little bit simpler, easier to learn, kettlebells might be up your alley. Or if you want a challenge and you want something really unique, club bells might be up your alley. Or there's many other, I'm just talking about club bells. Club bells are my favorite weighted club for fitness purposes. There are all kinds of weighted clubs out there. Indian clubs, small and large, really heavy wooden Indian clubs, mace bells, steel clubs. There's a lot of different companies, well, not a lot, but there are several companies now producing clubs for fitness purposes. And the club bell is my personal favorite. I haven't run across a higher quality or more suitable product yet, and if I do, I'll definitely let you guys know. But club swinging is a little bit harder to pick up than a kettlebell, so that's just something you should probably be aware of. Another thing that I just thought of now actually is the kettlebell. There's actually a lot of people involved with kettlebell training now. It's more of a mainstream product than the club bell, which is kind of, just there's a little tiny community around, global community around club swinging. That's interesting to me because clubs have been around a lot longer than kettlebells. These have been used for thousands of years for strength training, and kettlebells have not been around that long. But there's a lot more people who are into kettlebell training. There's much larger and more diverse communities surrounding the kettlebell. There's kettlebell sport. So if you would like to really get into it and start competing and do some of the long cycle clean and jerk events and whatever they have. I've never competed in kettlebell sport myself. But there is a more of a community aspect around kettlebells, and there's more information available on them. More people doing it, and so that's a really good thing. There are definitely people swinging clubs, but they're few and far between, and so that's just another thing to be aware of. It's kind of something different. It's kind of an alternative fitness tool, at least nowadays, and so that's another thing to be aware of. All right, so let's talk about some of the specific strengths of these tools. The kettlebell, it is a really balanced tool, like I already mentioned, but it really outperforms the club bell in a couple of areas. And I think when it comes to overhead pressing movements, or almost any overhead movements at all, the kettlebell is the tool of choice. So you've got your presses, and your push presses, and your push jerks, and almost all overhead exercises, many other overhead exercises. The kettlebell is the superior tool. You can do a lot of these exercises with a club bell too, but because of the way the grip is oriented, in that you're gripping around it and the weight is kind of pushing through your grip, or pulling through your grip in many cases, instead of holding pulling against your grip, which is more of a structural strength because it's resting more on your skeleton. The weight is pulling more against your skeleton than with the club bell grip, which is a much more muscular grip conformation. And so with certain exercises, this comes out in certain exercises, like with overhead pressing. You know, here I am in what's called ordered position. Then you can press it, I'll make sure I can get through the rafters here. Press it into torch position. And, you know, it's a great exercise, but if I'm going to be doing overhead pressing work, I'd rather use a kettlebell or even a dumbbell or barbell than a club bell. And so each tool has kind of its strengths and weaknesses when it comes to exercises, all the different individual exercises. Where the club bell really shines is when it comes to strengthening lateral movement patterns and a lot of different rotational movement patterns. So just for instance, you know, you can do this side rocket drill, which is kind of a rooting exercise, you know, really powered by the legs and the hips. And you would notice that if it was, you know, heavier than a 15-pound club bell for most people. But you can do this with a kettlebell, but it's much easier with a club bell. Same thing, you can swing it across your center line like so. So this is a side swing. So like with the kettlebell, probably the most renowned or infamous kettlebell exercise is the kettlebell swing. This is the soft style swing for those who care, with a single arm, obviously. You can also do two-hand swings, hard style swings. So that's kind of the most infamous kettlebell exercise. And you can also do side swings with a kettlebell, but obviously the kettlebell is a much larger or much greater diameter tool, and so there's a greater chance you're going to clip a kneecap, right, when you're doing an exercise like that, or hurt yourself in some other way. And so because of the narrower profile of the club bell, a lot of these lateral and rotational exercises are just easier to do and more suitable with a club bell. And, you know, so there's a lot that you can do. There are literally hundreds of basic kettlebell exercises and hundreds of basic club bell exercises. So you're not going to get bored using either of these, or if you do, it's not the tool's fault. So here's your mill. Try doing this with a kettlebell, right? So there's the point being is that there are many exercises that you can do with a club bell that you cannot do with a kettlebell. And there are also many exercises where the kettlebell is definitely there's a superior training tool for certain movements, like overhead work, just as an example. Another kind of advantage, these are both great tools for grip training, but when it comes to training your grip, the club bell definitely takes the cake. It is, and it's for a number of reasons. One of the reasons is because it does have that traction component of pulling through your grip, and so it's a much greater muscular action that's involved to hold on to a club bell than it is with a kettlebell. And so it trains your, people who pick up a club bell for the first time and go through an actual workout for the first time, 9 times out of 10, in almost all cases, their grip is going to be fried, and that's going to be the first thing to go. And they might be doing a club bell leg workout. If they're a beginner and they haven't trained with this tool before, 9 times out of 10, they're not even going to feel it in their legs before their grip is just completely fried. Until you get that initial training adaptation, your grip has adapted, you've gotten that grip strength and endurance built up. And it usually takes at least a few weeks, maybe a few months to acquire. But again, of the two tools, the club bell is definitely more effective for grip training, and it's because you can use the club bell in so many different ways, in so many different positions and movement patterns, and move it all around your body much more easily than with a kettlebell, and much more safely than with a kettlebell. And something I should probably mention is that these are both very safe tools. I can think of one time that I ever dropped either of these. I dropped a club bell once, and it was a new club bell design that I was evaluating, and my evaluation took me by complete surprise. I'd been training with club bells for several years and had never dropped a club bell, or even come close to dropping a club bell, for all I know. And just all of a sudden, out of the blue, dropped a club bell, and that particular design got an F for its grip texture. But other than that, these are very safe tools. A lot of people have asked me, is it something you can, have you ever dropped one on your foot? What would happen if you dropped it on your foot? It's like, well, this is not a tool that you're going to use, while you're talking on your phone, right? Or surfing through your playlist on your iPod or whatever. I don't even know. I don't surf through my playlist when I listen or when I train. But this is a tool that it requires your full concentration when you're using it. And if you're paying attention, if you're exercising mindfully, and if you've been taught properly, if you've learned how to perform the exercises, then they're a very safe tool. The biggest risk is not using them properly with proper technique. And that can be dealt with education, right? Studying the movements, learning the basics. With the club bell, making sure you understand the 7 key components of structure: crown to coccyx alignment, shoulder pack, elbow lock, all those things, which will make you a more efficient mover in all different strength activities and many fitness activities as well. And so just thought that should be said. They're both very safe tools. I'd say they're just as safe as a dumbbell. There are certain other safety considerations, like if you're training in a crowded health club and people are walking all around you, probably shouldn't be swinging a club bell, or you should find some space where you have some space. And I won't get into all the safety stuff in this video, but they're safe if you use your head and train mindfully and always pay attention when you're swinging it. That's probably the best advice I can give. So what else is there? I've talked about the grip, talked about that. I think those are kind of the basics of club bells versus kettlebells. Again, they're both great tools. It's kind of an apples to apples comparison because in the grand scheme of things, they have a lot more similarities than differences. And it really comes down to your personal preference. Which one do you think you'll enjoy using more, you'll be more inclined to use and stick with over the long term? That's the tool I think you should invest in. So I guess that's all I've got to say for today. I could talk about this stuff for a long time, and I have at length with many people who've been interested in them, but I don't want this video to go on forever, so I'll wrap it up now. Thank you very much for watching. If you made it to the end of this video, I'm really impressed, and I really appreciate your time. I hope this was helpful for you. Please let me know, and I'll see you in the next video. Take care.